Okay, I think we're ready. Do we have all of our board members online?
Where is Eric?
I'm here.
Ah,
Catherine Wallace. Do we have Kathy? I don't see Kathy.
I don't either.
Do you want to reach out to her, Marnie, or should we?
Yeah, I'll send her a note.
Yeah, just take 1 second.
Well, the good news is we have a quorum, huh?
Yeah. Oh, there's Kathy. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, 1 second. Okay. So I'll go ahead and call to order the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea's Historic Resources Board meeting for Monday, July 18th to order. Roll call, please.
Board Member Croman. Here. Board Member Gualtieri. Board Member Hall.
Here?
Board Member Pomeroy.
Here.
Chair Dyer.
Here. Okay, great. I'll now ask the public if there's anyone wishing to make any comments to the board on items that are not on the agenda may do so now. Seeing none, I will move on. One second. Move on to the announcements. Are there any announcements from board members or from staff? Okay, hearing
No
none.
announcements from staff.
Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. We do not have a quorum on the minutes for May 16th or June 20th, but we do have one for April 18th. So I'll entertain a motion to adopt the minutes from April 18th, 2022, unless there's any comments or corrections from staff or the board.
I move to approve the minutes of April 18th, 2022.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Board Member Croman,
Yes.
Board Member Hall, Board Member Pomeroy,
Yes.
Chair Dyer.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'd also want to let the public know that we do not have a quorum for DS 2300 Clausen application, and that will be continued to the August meeting. So if you're here to watch for that, that will be not on this agenda. So moving on to the orders of business. The first one we have is the historic context statement update, review of the working draft. So staff report, please, on that.
All right, can everyone hear me and see my screen? Excuse me.
Yes, everything looks good.
Okay. So for anyone not familiar, the city is in the process of updating its historic context statement. I'll just do a quick review as well in case anyone is new to this topic or is joining for the first time. But the city's historic context statement was first adopted way back in 1997. It was updated in 2008 to cover the period 1940 to 1965. And this current update will extend it for another 20 years, covering 1966 to 1986. And this is a grant-funded project. The city has received $30,000 in grant funding from the California Office of Historic Preservation. And we are working with our consultants, past consultants, Seth Bergstein and Kent Seavey as well. There is a subcommittee for this project. The subcommittee members are Catherine Galtieri and Eric Dyer. And through their subcommittee meetings and also past HRB meetings, it's been identified that extending the document for another 20 years isn't going to get us where we want to be. And ultimately, we have identified the need to really do a broader reformatting of the whole document. Currently, it's thematically organized instead of chronologically organized. There aren't photographs in the document presently, and it's missing character-defining features for the architectural styles. So that's a bit beyond the scope of the grant funding. So I just want to remind everyone, we're splitting the project into two phases. Phase one being the grant-funded 20-year update, and phase two is going to be a broader effort. Here's the project timeline. Today, we'll be reviewing a working draft. This has been advertised to the public in the Pinecone, in the city's Friday letter, the city's listserv, and it's also posted on the city's website. And those of you who have reviewed it will have seen that there are tracked changes in red. So don't feel like you need to read the entire document, but the bits in red will draw your attention to what's been changed. There are deadlines associated with the grant funding. So we're looking to get this phase 1 approved at the next HRB meeting, August 15th. So we're definitely interested in hearing your comments today. And if you have additional written comments, please get those over to us as soon as you're able. We'll be postponing taking the project to the Planning Commission and the City Council and the Coastal Commission until we move on to that phase 2. So we have a working draft to go over today. And like I said, we're seeking feedback from the board members and the community. And before I hand it over to Seth, who will be speaking to some of the new architectural styles, I'll just give you a quick summary of some of the changes that Seth has incorporated. So as you're familiar with, the context statement has these 5 chapters. There's no updates to that first chapter. The economic development chapter, our consultants have added context as it relates to the expansion of Carmel Plaza. There was a commercial building moratorium in 1973, the Wells Fargo Bank, 7th and Dolores, the Nielsen Market. They've also discussed the ongoing impacts, good and bad, of tourism, ban on new restaurants, and other demographic changes. And then in the government, civic, and social institutions chapter, our consultants have talked about the 1984 general plan, conversations and debate about the use of public property, and how the mayor was made an elected position. But the bulk of the consultants' work has really been in the architectural development chapter. They've discussed Mission Trail Park and Piccadilly Park, but really have put a lot of work into identifying some new architectural styles. You'll notice that the styles, even though we've been tasked with extending it for this 20-year period of 1966 to 1986, some of the architectural styles that we see in those decades actually start prior to that period. So you'll see some of these styles starting in the 30s and 40s, and we'll get into that in a minute. So Seth is with us today, and he is going to speak to these 8 architectural styles. There's a small change from the outline that you all approved last month, and Seth can explain his strategy behind that. And Seth, if you don't mind unmuting, I will let you speak to the following few slides about the architectural styles, and I can just progress the slides as prompted.
Great, Catherine, thank you so much. Great presentation as always. Let's go back to that style slide that summarized all of our styles. I don't think there's a lot of discussion about Cow Ranch, post-war modern international style. Of course, I'm putting that out there to everybody listening today. Let's find out. I think we're all pretty familiar with post-Adobe now. Want to focus on 2 styles. We'll just take them chronologically. Minimal traditional. It's funny, driving Carmel as extensively as I have the last, 6 weeks, many times, going many different occasions, try to get the best photos we can get. There is a lot of variance of the style in Carmel. And I think a lot of it is what locals, what Carmelites, and what folks like myself and Kent been studying for years is, Murphy has built some. I listed one last year that the Jensen House that was, forgive me, I can't remember the architect right now, but so their architects were also attempting the style. And remember, at this time period, the idea was to adapt a style that was still colonial, that was still traditional in its roots, but that buildings that could be constructed very, very quickly and very inexpensively. I think what I've noted in the Carmel styles is the variety of little changes. Like the photo to the right, you see we have a bay window, which is not normal. And I think I have a few other photos in the update. You also see some with beautifully made Carmel stone chimneys, brick chimneys. So what I will probably do before the next iteration is see if we can embellish the character defining features a bit, frankly, on all the styles. And we'd love input on that if anybody has it. For those who didn't attend, we reached out to the SHPO's office to find out if modernism had been categorized in a somewhat definitive and statewide accepted way. And they pointed us to our typical secondary sources, particularly McAllister, a couple of modernist sources. But really, they said it was really up to the, within a certain framework, it was up to particularly the location of what we're dealing with, where we are. And also trying to see if we could codify that a little better for Carmel. Let's move to the Bay region, because I think that might bring the more of the questions. We had originally divided this in the very sort of characteristic way that lays out first and second Bay region styles, and then trying to figure out how do we fit in this next 20-year period that makes the most sense. And what you start to realize is that the Bay region is ongoing. And one of the reasons why I showed recollections in this photo is that, and also wanted to make sure we showed the Bertie and Shaw building at 7th and Dolores to see that it impacts commercial architecture and it's impacting modernists as we call them today. And when you look at the Bay region style as a very, very Western woodsy expression of space rather than mass, and in a way, a departure of the box in a landscape in which it was interpreted in many parts of the East coming down from Europe. There's still a decidedly Bay region California style going on in Carmel. So we decided to combine them all into one style. I think it'll make it easier to deal with newer buildings as they come up because we understand it. And I also, frankly, took a little bit of a lead from the current historic resources inventory already lists Bay region as a style. And it's basically saying anything first or second that they encounter here, most of which are with the exception of Hill, are one or two buildings in the town limits. The architects are coming down, either their clients or clients they had in the Bay Area or in LA, predominantly Bay Area. And they want a house designed by William Worcester. They want a house designed by one of these Bay Area masters. What I found very interesting was getting to know a lot more about Albert Henry Hill. Not only how many buildings he's done in Carmel and how involved he was in the city government during the time, which I thought was very interesting. And frankly, didn't know that. But speaking to the style, what gets interesting is you look at modernism in this city. Basically, architects modernist architects are not doing one style. I mean, obviously, Frank Lloyd Wright is a classic example of that. But I'd make the same argument for Albert Henry Hill. You could argue some of his buildings are expressionist with the way he treats roof forms, the way he treats overhangs. So there's going to be kind of a sort of a, I guess, like a border between two countries or something where these styles will kind of overlap. The inhabitants of both countries reside in both countries. I think in certain cases in modernism, particularly here, that is the case. But they are still woodsy buildings. And one thing I want to work a little bit more about the CDFs on this style is I think, and also on integrity thresholds, if you'll notice, they're not broken down by style yet. It's probably a lot more important for a Bay region building to retain exterior cladding that's original. Because exterior cladding and the exterior window systems are so important to the design of the building. It may be less so for a California ranch. So these are the kinds of things we like to nuance in the second phase. But that's probably the single biggest stylistic thing that might be unexpected from last month. So I wanted to kind of put that out there. And since I think we have an hour, I think what I'll do is just kind of, if you don't mind, Catherine, let's start again from the beginning, just run through the styles, just to make sure, people haven't seen them presented yet publicly. So somewhat chronologically, bear in mind the modernist styles a lot of them are going to keep going up till now. So you have minimal traditional, of course, and the California ranch, we all know. Not a high concentration of California ranch buildings within city limits. Of course, we all know out in Carmel Meadows and heading out to the outside the limits, we see that form a lot more because you were able to lay out lots and more of a horizontal orientation than you can in our city here. Where you'll see interesting sort of 40s-ish ranches or ones that are early in Carmel, except for the ones I photographed, they're mostly on Ridgewood Road, but scattered in and out, especially northeast. You'll see it minimal traditional kind of developing into that. And with a narrow and deep lot, the ranch will run down the lot rather than being presented as a horizontal building elevation to the street. So that's going on as well. But the classic Cal Ranch is not really here much. Bay region, we did. Okay.
Seth, can I interrupt you for just a second?
Sure.
I'm just gonna wonder whether it's worth having comments as we go through this, or do you want to go through everything and then hear the comments at the end and go back to these different styles?
I'll leave it up to you, everybody here. I'm fine either way. You want to go style by style, or?
I think so. I think it'd be good. Yeah, present the style, and then maybe we can make comments and go from there.
All right, let's.
So we're not, spending a long presentation and then having going back to the very beginning, which some people may have forgotten what's the stuff you were talking about. So I think that's a good way to do it.
All right, so we've got our minimal traditional. Any comments on MT from anybody?
I'm think this is just a formatting issue, but I think it'd be important to make clear. I see you made listed significant buildings within the style, which makes sense. And then you have photographs. What's not clear is like what houses those photographs are, other than saying they're on a particular street. I'm wondering if there's a better way to identify those.
Well, I think there's issues with context statements giving property addresses. You don't see property addresses very often, and that's kind of to protect the homeowner.
Okay.
The listed buildings we have.
I think that's okay. I think it's just, like for example, I'm just curious if I looked at this and saw this house in Santa Fe, I'm assuming the photographs would be one of the significant ones listed. So is that the Fisk house? Is that the Turner house? Is that the...
One of the problems is I cannot get good photos on 80% of these buildings. I mean, I've gone by some buildings 12 times.
Okay, so I guess that's a general question then. Is that the photographs
what
always going to be significant, or are they sometimes not?
Well, I think in a context statement, you want to sort of communicate what the varieties are. Anybody can go to the HRI and look up those three houses and see those varieties, and they're not. Some of them are not reproduced real well at the moment, but we could work on that. But we already know what those are, and I tried to get them, and with a lot of these, I just couldn't get the shots. And frankly, some of them are not great examples of the minimal traditional style in this case. Some of them have a lot of Carmel embellishments. I might argue they're not quite minimal traditional they're Carmel's version, right? They're just going to be slightly better built for the most part, little better materials, and you might see, say, in Emeryville or Berkeley. But what I tried to do, and again, that's why I wanted to review this while I have time to make changes. What I was going at is kind of showing the variety of what you'll see in these photos. Given the size of the document, it's hard to decide whether you run the photos left, and then your text to the right, or how you do that. I was curious if everybody thought about that. Mm-hmm. Now it's kind of just vertically down, almost like you scroll down a phone. The photos, I'd argue, are a little small. But anyway, that's my thinking about it, Eric, was that, if you can see the character defining features, hopefully in these photos, and then the listed ones, anybody in the public can go see and visit and check out and kind of see how the variety. So part of it was a variety thing too. I don't know how many photos we can include. Typically, you don't include, 20 photos of a style in a context statement. But, obviously Bay Region's a much broader style now, right? So that was hard to decide what to deliver. I know we're not in that style yet. Mm-hmm. But what's your suggestion on format? What do you think? You're reading it for the first time.
I think my suggestion is, of course, if you're not able to get photographs of the significant buildings, that's understandable. But preferably, the photographs that are shown would be listed on the historic inventory, or are, could be considered significant in general. Just better examples of the style, So that's what.
Yeah, but I guess what I would say to that is that they don't exist. I didn't see a minimal traditional building that was not altered in some way or not, and some of the inventory are highly altered.
Okay.
You have a Cal Ranch. It's an Adobe that's had every window replaced.
Okay. I'm just making
great communication of the style, is it?
Okay. Well, I'm just making a general comment. So as I mentioned in the beginning, if you can't find it, you can't find it. But that's in general, that would be what I would be shooting for. Just speaking of minimal traditional. For some reason, I have in my head the idea that, or in the history of looking at some of these, is that they often do have, for example, maybe this isn't general of every one of them, certainly the ones you show in the photographs, but they have more of a horizontal window light configuration sometimes. Sometimes they use corner windows and things like that. Is that?
Yeah, it's out there. It's definitely out there.
Okay, so I just wondered if that might have been a character defining issue or not, but I guess maybe that's some are, some aren't. Is that what you're?
Well, yeah, and you know, there's one also on Santa. That little northeast section. There's kind of a group of nice variety of them, and there are some that just the photos just didn't look good. But there's one you're talking about. You can almost argue goes into that that first modernism one I have, not Bay Region. The next one, you know, they're almost international. You know, but they're not flat roofs, but they have what came to be known as the Wrightian window, right? They've got a wood sash corner window, right? And it's generally it's a 3/3 or, you know, horizontal. Very typical fenestration you'll see out of that time period. It's a good question. I mean, maybe what we need is more photos, but frankly, the listed minimal traditional buildings were not outstanding photos. Even if you want to do them, I think we need to reach out to the homeowners and do them properly.
And maybe staff could help with this too. I know it seemed historically that and maybe you've already done this, Seth, but you know, if you ask staff to find all the minimal traditional buildings that are on the inventory, it's a fairly quick cross-reference, and you probably have done that, but I just want to make sure that's been used so that we can make sure we have the best examples.
Well, Catherine's been great about that, but I'm not going to ask the planners to go out and try to find a photo.
Not the photo, but yeah. So
well, the photos have been the time. I mean, there's still photos in there with trucks in front. I've gotten to these places 20 times, you know, and really, and there's a truck there every time, you know. So it's a big challenge. It's been the biggest challenge I've had working with this document so far, other than trying to write into it.
Okay, and then I guess
we'll keep working on the photos for sure. Any additional comments on this style?
Well, again, I'm going to go back to the format again. And so I would, again, if the photo is of, for example, one of the listed buildings you have, I'm fine with not listing the address, but maybe we could list whether it is one of those significant buildings listed, so we know what the Turner House is or the Stoney House is.
Well, in the caption, I would do that. I mean, the captions are all structured the same. That's
what I'm talking about, the captions, yeah.
Yeah, if I tell you a building on an address that gives you the street, that means it's not listed.
Okay.
You know, I mean, if it's listed, I'll tell you the architect. You'll see in some of the other photos, there'll be an architect and the building, you know, the building name as it's on the inventory.
Okay, fair enough.
But let's be clear before we convene, before we go, what you want the format to be. There's not a lot of time left. And I've got time to do that, but I don't know how much time I have to do other stuff if there's other stuff. So
that's all I think what I said is all I have to say about that.
I do have a question, and maybe it should have been asked or stated just as we were starting, but who historically, because this is not the first one of these that we've done, who is the historical primary consumer of this information? Can you tell?
You want me to answer that first, or sure? The user of this information runs from city government on down. The idea of a document like this is when you pick up an historic context statement, and you have a planner that says, you know, I've got a minimal traditional building. Does it have enough character defining features for it to be listed? You know, is it something, you know, if a homeowner comes in and says, I have this building, you know, it looks like something in your report. Can you help? Can something guide me? And then the character defining feature lists combined with your historic integrity assessment and knowing what your eligibility is what's going to create the historicity of the building. Without the integrity, you do not have an historic building. It's just, look at it as a 50-50 thing. Unless it's the most important historic association, you know, early history, you know, not even someone like a mayor would necessarily justify that. You need to have your historic integrity. And that's really what the document's missing. So we're in the time we have, we're trying to impart how it's traditionally done now, meaning within the last 10 years, almost every consultant does it this way. And, you know, we all have little variations of it, but you basically look at buildings somewhat in a forensic manner about its parts and about what the technology behind the making of its buildings parts are and whether those parts date to the period of significance. So understanding your character defining features is how you'll sort of, someone who is not a specialist like who we have here today, all of us in the room, who aren't on boards and who aren't planners and people that work with us every day, you're trying to make a document that the public can use. And you're also trying to defend buildings when you also can defend or be able to talk about certain buildings. 7th and Dolores, if it was talked about more, may have had less controversy at the time. It may not have, but that's what this document, I guess, to answer your question my way, is intended to do. And what we're trying to introduce on all these styles is a format to do it. I'm sorry, the traditional way to do it, and I'm totally open to any format that you think fits this town and the communication better. That's why we're all here. So,
I appreciate that. I think it's important that we keep that in mind too as we're putting this document together. Is who's really the primary user of it. So I appreciate that comment. Thanks.
And I would just mention that going back, after this section of work, the scope of work is done, what we're talking about is going back to the rest of the context statement and also giving it a little more detail and structure so that it's also easy to use and it's also easy to, protect the buildings that need to be protected and give us a basis to do so. So that's important. Carol, you want to go? Go ahead.
Yeah, I need to step even farther back. I think more photos would help, especially when there are nuances to each house that may not fit exactly into the character, as you describe. But also, let's say a 1970 house is going to be demolished, possibly, or changed dramatically. So what triggers the HRB getting some sort of notification that this house may be historic or may fit into some style? Like, how does that work? Is it the planners that decide whether this goes to HRB, based on these criteria, or whether somebody famous lived there, or any number of those factors? How is that all decided?
So I'll take this one.
Don't everybody speak at once.
I'm going to mute for a minute.
Right. So our historic preservation ordinance requires that anytime a planning application is submitted to the city, that the staff look at the property and evaluate whether or not it's eligible for listing as a historical resource. So we're doing this constantly behind the scenes. Every time we get an application, we're checking to see how old the property is. And if it meets the criteria to be evaluated, we send it off to the consultant to be evaluated.
So planners that start that whole process. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And then when a property is deemed historic, any future modification that they make to that is usually required to be reviewed by the board for the determination of consistency.
So these definitions of different styles of house would help the planners determine whether it might be qualified as historic. Is that correct?
The planners, as well as our consultants, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a tool as well for homeowners to see what the important elements of a certain style are. And as Seth explained, trying to make this document a little bit more approachable to homeowners instead of what we currently have, which is a little bit more in the format of like a novel, which can be, very intimidating to read through.
Agreed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I think this kind of format resonates well with the PowerPoint literate group of people that are probably mostly going to be looking at this type of material.
Okay, thank you. Seth, why don't you go ahead and move on, since we have to get through all the different styles.
Great, thanks, Eric. And just one last quick statement. So the historic context statement basically relates the built environment to the history of a community. Try to look at it very simply. So you need to know the built environment expresses the history, and that's how you preserve buildings. And that's our intent anyway. California Ranch, I did present. The one or two listed I believe it was the Haskins house. I think that was the Adobe one. Again, Eric just did all the windows replaced. It just doesn't seem like the right building to photograph. And I didn't see any other listed ones that I don't think there are any. It might be one or two more. Where the one was turned down within the deep lot, so you can't show the ranch style at all. So again, the only ones out here are mostly out, basically heading toward Carmel Meadows. Obviously, once you get out of the city lines, they're all over the place. But there are early 40s-ish examples, and the one on the left is what I was trying to communicate. Although I think that carport's probably an addition. And there's the corner window, by the way, Eric, in that left photo that you're talking about. And that's one reason why that building is a little earlier, and you can see the 4-part sash. So that's California Ranch. So I'll stop there and see if there's any comments on that one while I take notes.
Any comments? I guess my comment again would basically be, it'd be really nice to find the good examples of the style. And I understand it's difficult to get good photographs of them. So, I mean, I think that's a general thing. Maybe we do the best we can. I know we have a time limit and we go with what we have at the end of that. And maybe when we go to the next phase of this, if we were able to find better photographs, we take advantage of that. But I understand the limitations.
Yeah, and just one quick question on that, from a planning standpoint, and just from anybody in the public, how amenable would the public be to them being notified, and then we show off the inventory by making it all out of the inventory? There was an idea I had, which I think is a good one, but I can't be sneaking onto people's yard. Many of these houses have high fences, as you know, and legally I can photograph from the street is about what I'm supposed to be able to do. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a great idea. It's not something we're going to be able to do for this submittal, obviously, but I don't know. Is that something politically people may not want? I have no idea, but it would be interesting. It would be interesting to do it that way.
I guess one of the questions would also be maybe, or technique might be, Seth, if you have a list of buildings you think would be good and you just haven't been able, you think you need to be able to get inside the property line to take a good photograph of it, let's make note of those and maybe we could reach out and see if that's possible or not.
I mean, the city's already entered into a give and take relationship with people that are on the registry. So, I mean, I don't think it's beyond the pale to ask, hey, we'd like to use your house as an example. And they certainly have the right to refusal, but I don't think that's beyond asking. I also have another question though. What's the format that this is going to be published in? Is it going to be purely electric or is it going to be hard copy as well?
Electric. It will be available on the city's website.
So you could actually update the photos, as they become available.
That's an option.
Isn't Catherine Gualtieri's house ranch style, and it's in town here? That might be a good example. She described it as a ranch style.
We looked at for sure. Mm-hmm. And of course, she's obligated to let us photograph it.
That's right. No problem there.
Just tell her Carol nominated her house.
Okay,
I'll move on to the next style then. Any Bay Region specific comments?
Well, Seth, I'll ask if there's anything more you want to say about this? You talked about it a little bit, of course, already.
I have some of the same concerns you Eric, that you have. Quite frankly, I don't know if the photos are communicating the styles, particularly for modernism. Well, modernism is just all over the map in Carmel. It's just not easily categorical, and it shouldn't be, right? I mean, Eric, do you design buildings all in one style? These architects are working for a long time and they're dabbling in everything. So my last comment on this style is I think leaving it as one style, we may want 2 or 3 more photos. And I guess the next question is maybe we do a full page of photos and include more photos, but that's as your consultant, as someone who's really concerned about the final product, I am still concerned about the photos, their size and whether they're really communicating. But that's all I'll say about Bay Region.
Okay, I guess I have some comments about it. So I think I understand your thoughts about including, you know, the first, second, and third Bay Area regional styles in one. I'm just wondering whether they're within that overall heading, whether it's good to distinguish them a little bit, only because they are really different, right? I mean, and the time frames are sometimes, I mean, obviously the first Bay Area original style is let me so what do you consider the first Bay Area original style? I thought it was Mabec and things, but what do you is that Craftsman?
Well, you know what that's actually a good question stylistically from all the books we've read, right? You know, their first Bay region is going to be Craftsman if we do the next phase, as far as I'm concerned. I don't see Mabekian first Bay region in Carmel, and arts and crafts movements. Probably I've read more about that movement and its art than anything in my life. To me, and I don't even really, if you want to have an argument about styles, I think first Bay region style to make it craft, this should just be Craftsman. I've never understood trying to lump these modernist buildings that are expressing space so differently than arts and crafts houses are. I don't get it. But, you know, again, we're told to write within what's been accepted. And, you know, I'm not going to impart my personal feelings of 30 years experience on other historians. So that's.
Okay, but the way you're writing this.
Yeah, so in the future, Eric, I would go with Craftsman for that time period of Carmel.
I mean, Craftsman is one of the styles defined.
Second and third. What was that?
Craftsman's one of the styles defined in obviously a style that's not part of your update, but that's in there, right? So I mean, second scope of work, maybe you go in and define or acknowledge the fact that a lot of the Bay Area regional's first style comes from that Craftsman basis. But obviously,
it's developing at the same time. It's developing at the same time on the West Coast in three major centers.
Yeah, you can't say Charles Green is Bay Area regional, but you can, you know, you obviously could say Mabec is. So that's, anyway, but they're coming and building at the same time. And
I mean, I guess that's a different discussion, but I don't, yeah, it's actually exactly what you said, Eric. The houses I see in Carmel, at least, I would not call first Bay region. You're right.
Okay. So let me just go then move on to the fact that the style that we're calling Bay regional style is the second and third.
Well, we have the date tells us that as well.
And then, but I mean, the second is usually considered like Worcester, and I guess you can, Hill is kind of crossover. And I mean, there's actually a Hill house that's on the inventory that's international style. So to talk about this bridge of styles, I would. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I think what I'm going to get at is if we do it this way, I think maybe the character defining issues or something needs to be stated in the text, because we're using these character defining issues. It says, does it meet this style? And we look at the character defining features as a way to determine whether it's of that style. But we need to make clear in this case, they certainly don't need to have all of them if you're including both, right? Because obviously the Worcester house isn't going to be a big timber house as an example. So I think we need to be clear about how we're using this heading and how we're defining the character definer features, and I don't know whether you maybe even break it down into second and third and give character defining features for each, but that's an option, I suppose.
Well, the introduction states in the first sentence that we're talking second and third Bay region here. My other comment to what you're saying would be, as I really got into these buildings, as Kent and I really got into these buildings, and we know his experience as well, they share most of those features if they're untouched, right? One may be expressed as tall barns, third Bay region. One may be expressed horizontally, like Worcester's Merchant House, second Bay region. But I don't know if there's enough buildings in Carmel to nuance breaking it up into. That's one reason why I want to throw this out to everybody. If you disagree, we won't do it. But the CDFs are pretty much the same. Well, what are they doing? You know, I mean, look at the variety of buildings you see there. Look how different they all are. Modernism is a bitch to classify. I really, it just is. And it's I think even more challenging for a homeowner that comes in. What's a good modern building? It's a challenge. So especially Eric, with your experience, if you think we can nuance this better, that's what I'd like to spend the time on in these next couple of weeks. Tell you the truth, is how can we make all this better? And by the way, if subcommittee wants to meet with me, just let me know. No problem. Next week or something.
And maybe I think the idea of really having, when we list, I mean, I don't want to skimp on the listing of significant buildings under the style. And I think under this one, it's important because it's a way of helping to categorize things that you're talking about, so that if we have a list of the significant buildings that feature different types of character defining parts of it, then I think that makes it more clear. It's more descriptive. If you have the Worcester House, you have 2 Worcesters and a Sedleski. I think, we should list the Henry Hill, maybe you mention the Charles Moore, just so they understand the breadth by the listing of the significant buildings, what this encompasses. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and what I'm wondering, Eric, what do you think about listing CDS for what we're going to call First Bay Region, Second Bay Region, and I don't know. Again, it's the challenge is that other than first and second having a different way they're oriented on the site, Third Bay Region buildings tend to go very vertical in this town, right? Because they're trying to get up in the trees, trying to get views. The lots aren't necessarily conducive as much to a long horizontal building within the city limits. So I don't know how many, if we break it up, I don't see much of a difference in those CDS other than one's more horizontal than the other. And like you said, these architects designed it all of these styles. So,
okay. Well, I think that I'm okay with keeping it in the same grouping. I'm just, I guess.
And the other thing too is we could have another go around on this when we finalize all of it, or if, assuming there is another phase, and we don't know. But what I was trying to do on this phase was to make sure, in case there wasn't another phase, we had some good basic information that improves the document, but it still reads like the original document. Because what if the money isn't available? That's kind of how I'm thinking too.
No, I agree.
Yeah. So I'm trying to lay in a structure here that any consultant could add on to, assuming they agree. That could be another issue. But
okay, I think I stated what my comments were. Is there any other comments from any of the board on this style? Okay, do you want to move on since we're? And I see Ian is, okay, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Ian, do you have a comment?
Yeah, since you guys are piecemealing this section by section by section by section, I think the public should have a chance to weigh in for each of these things. So for the reasons you said earlier, I think that a lot of the homes in Carmel-by-the-Sea that are like the Sedleski house or John Thodos's houses, a lot of these houses are, as you were saying, are very uncomfortable fits with any given style. So I think you should say explicitly that categorization, a lot of these homes defy categorization, that Carmel-by-the-Sea is a place that has historically drawn creative, independent, alternative thinkers, and that's naturally going to be reflected in the built environment. So a lot of these houses are really outliers, and they might loosely rhyme with some of the styles that are going on at the time they're built, but really they're often unique examples unto themselves that are reflections of the architects who create them.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Any other public comment? I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. I think I don't see any more. Okay, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to Seth. I think Ian's point, Seth, is something you may want to comment on. So go ahead.
He's absolutely right. It's not only that, you're dealing with this place that explodes after World War II, right? With so much investment, so much development, so much money that you could have an architect come down from San Francisco. The best architects in California have been here, and design pretty much to an unlimited budget. And do what and express this. What the commenter really just said is a lot of one-offs. You know, I mean, you could stand 3 Albert Henry Hill building photographs together, and they all look really different. You know, so yeah, when I said it was a bitch, I mean that in kind of a funny way, maybe in my old New York way, but that it's challenging. It makes it fun. You know, it makes it really interesting. But I mean, I wrote San Jose Modernism, and it was San Jose very different. You know, much more standardized modernist forms, but. And we came up with kind of our own terminology. It seems to have done pretty well. I think it overlooks certain things, but you know, you don't deal with CDFs quite the same. By that I mean character defining features. Everybody knows what the character defining features of a Tudor revival building is, or a fairy tale cottage, or you know, a suburban California ranch, right? I mean, you know, those are so easy to categorize. You get into this one-off element, especially with Carmel. So really, if folks here feel this is not explaining well enough, I may want to take another stab at doing that.
I guess my comment to that would be: is there a way to talk about this in a general way, as a preamble to the architectural style section? Because I think what Ian's talking about is really crosses the history of Carmel and crosses all types of styles. So. Well, you know, acknowledging the idiosyncratic nature of Carmel's architecture is, I think, important. And maybe I have to go back and read it all, but I think that needs to be explicit, maybe in the beginning of it. And I certainly understand that we need to have some structural format to this thing, and we need to define character defining features as much as possible. But I also think that's, one of the reasons why I want to have a significant amount of the significant buildings listed under a style as we can, because I think by listing them, you help define it more than just the few structure. I mean, it allows for that, the exceptional parts of it, saying this is we include this in the style, and it's considered significant with this, but it's, you know, you can also look at it as an individual piece as an artistic, you know, expression of the artist.
Now, the summary in architectural development does touch upon that. I'm not sure if I mean, again, it does read like a novel, but one reason why I didn't try to embed any language in that chapter and leave it as sort of an historical summary of styles and architects, it does a pretty good job. I mean, there's no photos, of course, but I mean, if everybody here would go back to that and tell me if you think it's lacking. I remember reading in several places the notion of Carmel as a unique place, and its creativity and architectural development expressed through various styles. I'm pretty sure it's there, but I'll go back and double check that. I certainly can add a sentence or two. But one reason why I tried to add separate headings in this chapter is again, to still keep a document that's workable in case we don't have another phase. Yeah. And anyway.
I'm totally with you.
On to post-war modern. Most of these are scattered about Carmel. These will tend to have, it's almost taking a minimal traditional house and turning it into a modern house in a way. Elston and Cranston did a lot of these. They are either flat roof or shed roof. Generally, you have a carport that's integrated. The earliest ones will have wood sash windows similar to that 4/4 I talk about in wood sash, or they'll have aluminum depending on the year they were made. But they are, and Elston Cranston's important here, and they are they're prolific enough style to, I should say, occurrence to give them a separate style. And again, I'll see what else I can find unlisted and significant. What I was trying to do was keep it all to 3. I may not have gotten all of them. But Eric, you're right. As many, that's a good motivation for getting as many on the HRR anyway that are on there. I'll make sure next phase we do that.
Okay, and then on this phase, I would say, it seems to me that this style would a lot of John Koningshofer's work would fall under it. And I think I noticed you put a Koningshofer Evans house in the organic style. I would probably put that in the post-war modern style, but that's, you can comment on my opinion on that.
That gets back to the philosophy. And Kent did not get back early enough from his visiting his kids in Colorado. He got waylaid. He'd be here, but I won't speak for him, but he would disagree.
But there's a lot of Koningshofer in the area that really defines, I think, what you're talking about, this style. And I think
it does too. And this goes back to that borderline between styles I was talking about. And one of the things that makes modernism so challenging, I would agree with you. And I actually had the same discussion with him, Eric. So I think this gets down to how important, or maybe what we do is if the character defining features of some of these listed Königshofer buildings do fall in that style, we put it on this page. You know,
well, I'm thinking, and then calling it post-war is, I'm just afraid. I wonder what some of the timing or some of the built dates on some of those buildings are. Like there's a Königshofer on, I think 13th in San Antonio and Scenic, and that's next to the Mayhew, for example. That's probably built after 1960, but maybe it's still kind of this style. Anyway, that's.
Yeah, the philosophical discussion I got with Kent was that it was organic, because I asked the same question, and I don't have the kind of experience he has. I'm about halfway there, so yeah, I don't know. I don't have an answer for you there. Where there isn't a book out there that's going to tell us. So again, a lot of historic context statements, you're trying to create new approaches, particularly to modernism. I'd say mostly to modernism.
Okay, well, that's my comments on this. Does anyone else have any comments on the post-war modern style or the definition of it or what's included in it? Sorry, I don't. Okay.
International
style. Yeah, this is a tough one too here. You want to present this one, Seth?
Well, the international style changes in Carmel. It's not a box in a landscape anymore. It adapts more to its site. The roof lines may not be as typical as you might imagine on the East Coast. The Markham House you see there is literally the only one I think that's in Carmel. It's very Irving Gill-like out of LA. I didn't see a lot of again, photographable examples were difficult to find. In every architectural history book, it's defined as a big part of modernism. And so we decided to throw it as a category. You could even argue the buildings we just looked at in that post-war style have somewhat of a low horizontal element to them. International style buildings express space, though.
So there's again, an Albert Henry Hill that's on San Antonio between Ocean and 8th. That I believe is on the inventory, and I would put that under the international style.
Isn't the house on the right, isn't that a stucco house?
It is a stucco house, but Irving Gill's, good question. Irving Gill's buildings are classified as international style. They were expressed in stucco. He did a lot of work in LA, particularly San Diego. But that's a great question. It gets back to what Ian said, and what Eric's been saying so much is that some of these buildings are one-off buildings. We're trying to categorize them within not only the accepted aspects of modernism that's been written about for 40 or 50, 70 years, but also this unique place that's Carmel.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to my original kind of statement question, about who's the audience, because I think this is a perfect example, and I understand this is a difficult style to define, but you have two examples where the layman would say, like, those are nowhere near the same type of building. Mm-hmm. They don't look anything alike. I'd be hard pressed as a layman to tell you why they're similar, and then we even talk about character defining features. One has them, although it's painted, and maybe you're looking closely or maybe you're not, because that's the gray house, and then you have a white stucco next to it. And I almost wonder, I don't know, I think we might lose, like in cases like this where ranch is a lot easier to define. When you get into styles like this, you might lose more people than you're helping.
Eric, do you have a better international style building that you know of? Because clearly we got to take that out. So that's a great comment.
I'm sorry, take what out?
The Markham House. Because I totally understand what he's saying. I mean, it's.
No, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess,
yeah.
I would like to go back. Maybe I'll go back and try to look at what, you know, the definitions of that are specifically. Obviously, it's like you say in your little paragraph here. It was based on this exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in 1931, and there was a lot of stuff included in that. And it was basically a kind of an exhibition, I think, that showed houses, European architects primarily. I mean, like the Markham House could be considered almost, and Irving Gill's basis was maybe Adolf Loos in Austria. And then you had Le Corbusier and Mies van der Rohe as part of it. What makes me think of this is maybe something more like is there a style called California modernism? I mean, there's the, you know, Esther McCoy's 5 architects that started that. I believe Irving Gill was part of that. I don't know if that defined a style, but it certainly is. It seems more specific to what you see in Carmel.
But there is post-war modern part of that too. You know what I mean? I mean that's why it's great to have a discussion with a bunch of different braids here, because it's the international style, Eric, as you and I know it, when we think about that exhibition in the East Coast, it's not in Carmel. Okay, so you know it's, and you can even argue that Irving Gill photograph has a bit of a brutalist aspect to it because it's expressed in stucco, and you see a lot of mass there. So yeah, I frankly did not have another photo, and it was listed as international style, and talked to my expert and rehashed my knowledge of Irving Gill and understood why Murphy did it, and why the client may have wanted it, but it's not a great image, you know, no question. So we'll keep searching on that, but again, you know, if we're going to make decisions on changing styles or anything really, really structural, I will need to know by the middle of this week.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, really, I've got one more week to write. I mean, week and a half, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
But these are all changes that I frankly, I agree. You know, I agree with. You know, we're all looking at it fresh. You know, we're all dealing with this fresh. Our job is to try to guide you as best as you can to make it appropriate for your audience and your location.
Okay. I see in the comments, Ian has a question or mentions that there's a house in Nipro south of 8th that's international style. And I believe what he's referring to is actually the Roman House by Richard Barrett, which is on the list here. So.
Yeah, bye-bye. She said bye-bye. Say bye to Nora.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh, she's on the phone. Okay. All right, Nora.
Okay.
Yeah,
so let's I guess everyone think about this international style thing, and we'll go back to it.
Okay.
Later on. Organic style next, which that is more easy.
Yeah, writing organic, of course, is the influence of Frank Lloyd Wright. It's harmonizing the site with the building itself, the topography, and local, generally local and indigenous materials. When you get downtown, the expressions are mostly soaring roof lines, you know, adapted to a commercial kind of a structure. In this case, we chose to group Königshofer in that style, and again, that's a question we'll have to try to figure out in the next 10 days. But Königshofer certainly was a disciple of Wright. So was Mark Mills. Obviously, the two buildings that Mark Mills built together are right out of the Wrightian playbook. But Mark Mills, you know, of course, also designed so many different buildings, and some of them unclassifiable.
Although I think
so. We just tried to get a broad swath there. And again, I wanted to, normally in a context statement for every style, you go commercial, institutional, residential, and you want to have photos and examples of each. That's why, if you want to go that route, it's a big fix to fix this document. Well, I'm trying to introduce kind of how you would do it, but ideally you would like to have at least commercial and residential in Carmel. At a minimal, there's not as much institutional stuff going on, right? It's a small place, but so anyway, that's organic.
Okay, so I come back to, I don't think John's Königshofer is organic, so I'll leave it at that. Other than that, I think it's clear. Any other comments from the board?
It doesn't look organic to me either.
Okay. Next style, Or are we coming to the end? Regional expression, okay. Go ahead, and Seth, you want to give a brief?
Regional expressionism is again expressing space. Modern materials in Carmel, mostly with soaring roof lines, and kind of taking the roof into 3 or 4 different sort of types that a group of architects started developing, and it trickles its way down here. There are not a lot of examples, again, but since it's here, we felt we should try to include it. You could argue, what is it, the Cruz House, Eric, with that soaring triangular roof line? You can almost argue is that too. And here, once again, that's Albert Henry Hill. You know, there's so much crossover. But these are 2 examples we liked. Obviously, everybody knows about Wincoop's house. It's slightly out of the city limits, one of the problems. But again, it's so visual. It's so many tourists and so many people know about the building. And the other one is Stein's Hof's residence. And the character-defining features are, again, so many of these overlap. You know, modernism expresses structural form. It expresses space. It uses wide expanses of glass. The primary change here is the expression of the roof line.
Okay. I mean, I think it'd be good to list. I mean, I think of the Cruz House and also the other one next to it to the north on Lopez of the Three Sisters would be considered expressionist. And I think it's okay to classify or, you know, basically talk about architects doing these different styles, right? If we classify the one Henry Hill house on San Antonio as international style, I think we can say his house on or the one on by the gate that you already showed the photograph of could be the Bay Area region, and then maybe his own house is Bay Area region, and maybe the one as the one to the north on the Three Sisters would be expressionist. I'm okay with
Yeah, we definitely want to add more buildings. What I will do is make sure anything on HRI that fits these styles we'll put in those lists.
Okay.
So at least we'll have a greater variety. But yeah, so you would agree with that? Maybe adding a photo of the. I think I have the wrong name of the house, but we're both talking about the same Albert Henry Hill house, the northern third sister. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can't say, right? I mean, that's not Third Bay region, is it? How could you say it is? Even a lot of historians would say it is. They would say that's Third Bay region. I don't know. It's not a shed. Yeah, it's outlandish, right? It's a one-off. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, I think we have one more style, everybody. Post-Adobe. So post-Adobe is as much a construction method as a style. What gets very interesting about post-Adobe is that it's expressed in flat roof, a bit in modernism here. I searched citywide to try to find a really good house that was not obstructed and couldn't. The one you see on the right is the only one I could get. Every one of those American Red Cross building. But it's a construction method, and interestingly enough, pioneered by Hugh Comstock. You see how his career is progressing. And part of it was addressing war material shortages and anticipating that. So he developed a construction method that was very local. The Adobe bricks, once he came up with the method, were made locally. And of course, using redwood and Adobe, essentially constructed houses in predominantly ranch styles. But of course, we have the 2-story motel over on right when you come into town on the northeast corner of Ocean and Junipero. That's post-Adobe adopted to a larger commercial building. Fairly easy to build second stories because you can support them. So post-Adobe is pretty clear to read. There's, I believe, one listed. Debate whether they should be painted or not. And ideally, you don't want to paint Adobe units because they already have a water-resistant skin, and stained, or let's say natural colored redwood posts and redwood structural details, and unpainted Adobe would character define more. Maybe we should make some kind of comment about that. But most homeowners don't want to see them unpainted, and I've encountered a lot of them in Carmel Valley. They're prolific in Carmel Valley. There's a number of in the meadows. Within Carmel itself, though, it does occur. And I also want to give, as they say, a shout out to Comstock because the variety and types of building designs and techniques he came up with, and he's regional, is really impressive. I know there's at least one Comstock, I think, in the Golden Rectangle area that's
just exceptional post Adobe, and I'll try to find that ASAP for you guys. Any other comments on this style? So I think we've gone through them all. Seth, is there anything else you want to add or have us comment on, or make sure? I guess there's other parts of this thing you want to go over. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this next slide is just a typical. You see this in every context statement now. I added some language. Normally, this would all be in Chapter 1 of the document. At least the integrity stuff. You would discuss all the regulatory things going on in Carmel in that Chapter 1, and I'd have this top part of this location through the 7 aspects, and that paragraph below that with the bolding is not my bolding. That's right out of National Register Bulletin 15, because I think it's really important for the public to see that it's a 4-step process, and you're defining what the character defining features and the photographs of these buildings within each style are supposed to do is help someone who's not as experienced understand what those essential physical features are, the character defining features of the building. And then the question is now, are the essential physical features visible enough? And basically, are the character defining features, are the construction materials that date to the building's period of significance, are they there? And the third is, which is used less, the last two are less important. You always do want to compare similar properties. In a small place, it may be difficult. And then trying to determine which aspects of historic integrity are the most important. And that's what these minimum eligibility requirements and integrity threshold sections try to do now with context statements. And again, I would consider, and I kind of just wrote these out of my head just to throw them out there to see what people thought. You would have more listed probably, and you would have them for each architectural style. You can argue historic materials are more important, or the most important thing on any building, but like we had said earlier, on some of these modernist styles, the materials really define the Bay Region style. So if someone goes to look at a building and it's in that time period and they see all the claddings change and they put sash windows in half the building, then it doesn't have the essential physical features anymore. So that's essentially what this section does in the document. Again, documents are usually described via theme and an associated property type, which this document isn't doing right now. So you would have it grouped by time period, and then you would know what buildings to expect because they were constructed within a certain time period. And then just updates to the timeline that just mirrored the narrative. And I updated a bunch of architect bios. I don't recall how many. Fair amount. Need to add Ralph Steen because of the photo of the Hofsa house. Eric, if you see any, you can get them to me next couple of days. We'll add them too. And that's an ongoing. And Eric, just to address whether we list significant buildings by the architects in the bios, it's not there now. And it seemed odd to me to do that for 12 bios and not the other one. So I just kind of left the bios, again, thinking there may not be another format, another phase. And also, I think when you write a bio, I don't know, you don't normally want to list everything the person did, but we do have a small town. It's certainly something we could do, or at least the ones that are on the inventory. I
like that idea.
Yeah. So that's why I didn't do that at this particular stage. I have not updated bibliography yet, just because I generally do that at the end. But that's just typical stuff. That's about it.
Okay. Thank you, Seth, for all the work. Let me go ahead after all that and, sorry, I'm going back to my Zoom. Open up the public hearing, unless there's any other questions from the board. Maybe we can bring it back to the board after the public hearing and get some comments. So I'll open it up. Is there anyone from the public that want to discuss the draft historic context statement and have any questions for the board or for Seth or staff? Ian, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment. Don't forget the architect who designed the meditation room at the Cherry Center. That's a really beautiful mid-century example. Great example of mid-century modernism fitting beautifully into the Carmel forested context. I just wanted to reiterate the just what I said earlier, just to caution everybody involved in the process to be careful about trying to land any of these particular homes in a given box. It certainly makes a lot more sense for an area like Los Angeles or San Francisco, where you have many examples of things are more outliers, but as someone well captured, we have these individual, unique, one-off examples. And while it's tempting to be efficient by trying to lump as many as you can into a given category, I think academically it's misleading, and it really does those particular buildings a disservice. Like the Sedletsky place on Scenic is another one that's this kind of where does that land? It could land in a few different categories. So thinking about maybe instead of just saying, Bay Area region style or something like that, maybe talk about, things that a given architect, were responding to. So a number of these post-war architects were responding to, the natural environment. They were using, natural building materials. So maybe think about categorizing in terms of Carmel regional motivations that inspired their work, opposed to buckets that a lot of other houses outside Carmel might land in.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Anyone else from the public want to address the board on all these issues we're talking about? I'm not seeing anybody. Okay, with that, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Board members, is there any additional comments you'd like to give Seth as he progresses to his final draft?
In the ethnographic portion, it talks about the Ohlone Indians. I think it's the Ramesson. I'm not exactly sure how to say it, but I'm not an ethnographic expert, but I have read a lot about the Indians in the area. I think they're the specific tribe that lived here. They're a subset of the Ohlone, so that just might be, probably not for Seth, but for the general group, that might be something that you want to look at to just make it more specific.
Thanks, Jordan. I guess I have a question on that general point. Are you open, Seth, to minor factual corrections from the original context statement? Or do you think if they can be done in an easy way, obviously they need to be corroborated and referenced, but is that something that's within your scope or timeline at all? I guess it depends on what it is, but just a general question.
I'll answer that question. Catherine's already been doing that and has been doing a great job. And I think you're better off having some of that handled by her.
Okay.
Because she's got a document that I'm assuming she's gonna, if she hasn't put it up already, I'll start writing into for the last of this. So we have one document. But again, with the timeline, I really didn't even spend any time on that chapter, I have to be honest with you. And I don't really see, other than as a history chapter, how it's relevant to the built architecture we're trying to analyze here. And it still sounds like we have a long way to go on that already. So, and I'd like to address Ian's comment at it also, but I'll wait until you're ready for that, Eric.
But yes, okay. If anyone sees factual inaccuracies, definitely send them over and we'll correct them.
Okay. Do you want to put your email address in the chat, Catherine, and people can, if, again, any of the public that sees some factual issues or questions about anything, send those to Catherine and we can see if we can get them addressed in this draft.
Yeah, and she's been doing a great job. She's been ahead of me on some of this stuff too. I mean, she really has, so I think the team's kind of getting some of that done. There's no question, to your question about some of that ethnographic stuff, it needs to be corrected. There's no question about it. And it's important. Yeah, there is so much in the historical narrative of that document that frankly probably a lot of it should be fact checked. I really tried to focus on the scope of work. I wanted to make sure partly too, the 66 to 86 was done quickly enough because I knew this other stuff was going to, raise a lot of questions and require some edits and revisions. So yeah, I think it's working fine.
Okay. So I guess I want to make just reiterate what we talked about before is that part of this push is that we're on a timeline that's mandated by the grant, and we do need to get this done and then submitted and put into the, an official update to our context statement. All I would say is that for the public, it'd be great to have, in my opinion, a push or to encourage our city officials and certainly this board to encourage the council and other people to move on to a subsequent update and a more broader update of the whole context statement that is needed. So Seth, you wanted to address Ian's comment again? Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think this came out in one of our earlier meetings. Eric, you brought it up. This whole notion of one-off. Carmel has a history of that probably since buildings were constructed here. So I really get his concern.
Please mute.
All right. This whole tradition of one-offs. Everybody hear me okay now?
Yes.
Sorry. Yes. Is really prevalent in Carmel, and it spans all the time periods. So I don't know how to create a style out of it. So the question I would throw to Ian, who's really interested and knowledgeable, is do you think Bay Region works as a broad enough style to sort of catch all of this? Because that really kind of, at least my attempt. So anyway, that's
yourself.
So how do you do it?
Yeah, I think you need to just, when you look at the Henry Hill homes, the Three Sisters, they're all so fairly different from each other. Or you look at, I think it's a trap. It's to try and land these things in any given category. I think it's, these are.
Yeah, mom.
Yeah. So
Yes.
It's a very difficult thing, and I think that for the credibility of the overall document, we should try and resist forcing certain houses into given labels if they don't fit comfortably.
I'm going to respond to it first, and then Seth can respond to that. One of which is this is not an academic document. This is a document that needs to be used by the city in order to make a legal basis, oftentimes, for historic preservation. And so that's the one thing where I think we need to do our best to categorize it, but then acknowledge certainly what Ian's saying is that there is that flexibility, but there may be these continuities that can be stated in maybe more than one style. There's certainly, like Seth was saying, these crossovers of structural expression and using natural materials and response to the setting that is just not one style and maybe should be expressed as character defining in more than one. But we do need to be able to discuss these styles because that is what is that is basically creates the legal document of an historic context statement. Ian, you have a comment? Go ahead. Open public hearing. Go ahead, Ian, or unmute, or somebody unmute him.
Thank you. So I think that to your point, Eric, about this, you were creating a document here so that the city can make a legal basis to say that this given example of a house needs protection, which makes it all the more important that when we land a particular house in a category, it needs to fit well, because an opponent, an opponent of someone who says, no, this house is not historic, this house should be allowed to be torn down, their hired consultant is going to say, well, that house is a terrible example of the Bay Region style, right? So anything we land in the category needs to be defensible in that category. It's a conundrum, but I think that, again, we need to be very careful how we land our things in this category.
I would acknowledge that. Thank you, Ian. I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to Seth. you want to make comments on that? I mean, I guess that's a question of, you know, for historians and attorneys, but I would certainly agree. We need to do our best to land things in the proper category and describe, and that's one of the reasons why, you know, expanding the list of significant buildings with how we're considering it would expand, you know, the definition of it by implication. Does that make sense? Go ahead. I'm sorry, you're muted, Seth.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought I interrupted you, Eric. Sorry. My final comment on it is that that's precisely why I made it one style, because it's too amorphous. It's this influence of a tradition of architecture, prominently here after World War II, and it's still going today. And I'm your consultant, and I'm telling you, I have as much of a concern about it as well, you know. But that's the reason why Kent and I finally made that decision. You know, I literally drove by every inventory building. I studied these buildings, and I finally went to them one day. I said, I don't see why we're breaking this up in the second and third Bay region. I actually basically said what Ian was saying, and that is it's too restrictive, you know. And I kind of said my feeling was the Bay region just keeps going. It's going and to try to generalize it more. But now the conundrum, which is what Ian's speaking to, is that makes it harder to defend. That means you can hire another historian and they could say it's not a good example. It's a real challenge. And I guess, yeah, that's what I'll say. Okay, I guess we just encourage the expansion of that description so that it's understandable in a clear way. Okay. Any other comments for Seth? Otherwise, I think we've given him quite a bit of input in the last hour or so. Any other comments from staff? Catherine and Marnie, do you think anything else you would like to hear from the board?
I think that's a great start. Thank you all, and we'll come back to you next month. Okay, thank you, everyone. There's no other comments. Let me move on to, excuse me. Getting back to the agenda. I apologize about this, but I want to make a quick pause in our hearing and resume in about 3 minutes, if that's okay for everybody. Okay, be back in 3 minutes.
Okay. Get an acknowledgement that everyone's back. Marnie. How about you, Kathy? Are you trying to find Kathy? Did we lose Kat? Oh, there she is. She's on her seat.
Somebody block me?
No.
Sorry, I see you. So you're there.
Yeah.
You're unmuted.
We're having a little bit of a technical difficulty. We'll be with you in a minute.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Chair.
Okay. I guess let me just do the introductions.
Sure.
Kathy, I don't see back in her chair is why I want to wait. Otherwise, we don't have a quorum.
Saray.
Yeah, I don't think we can really resume unless Kathy's here. So. There she is, I think. Kathy has returned. Okay, so let me move on to the next public hearing item. This is DS 21409, Strongman Miller, consideration of a determination of consistency with the Secretary of Interior Standards for Design Review application DS 21409 for the replacement of the front stairs and rebuilding the side porch and railing to conform to current building standards, along with the remodel of the rear studio located at Monteverde Street 2 northeast of 9th in the single family residential zoning district. Saray, you have a staff report.
Thank you, Chair. As you pointed out, this is the Strongman Miller project. And this is the Enoch H. Lewis house, and it's located on Monteverde 2 northeast of the 9th Avenue. And it was built in 1906. And it's significant under criterion 3. And this house exemplifies the style and design of the early 20th century Carmel. And it was added to the historic inventory on May of 2005. And the character defining features of this house are the horizontal clapboard and wood siding, as well as the steeply pitched roof with the overhanging eaves and the raised cutaway porch, and the fenestration on the front elevation. According to Meg Lewis, who did the phase 2 analysis, it's consistent with 1, 2, 5, and 9, and 3, 4, 7, 8, and 10 is not applicable. And Secretary Standard 6 will be consistent with modifications. And Standard 6 states that it's any deteriorated historical feature will be repaired rather than replaced. And where the severity of the deterioration requires replacement of a distinctive feature, The new feature will match the old in design, color, texture, and where possible, materials. And the replacement of missing features will be substantiated by documentary and physical evidence. And the applicant is proposing a modification for the front stairs, the side porch, as well as the rear studio garden shed. And the stairs and the rails were rebuilt in 1978, and to meet current safety and code standards, they want to lengthen the stairs, also have a shallow run and lower rise height, and also a taller handrail, again, to meet code current standards. And the side horizontal sidings, which are one of the defining features, are original. So they are going to be reused and restored. And they will be used on the north elevation because it's the more visible side. And for the south side, they're going to be using in-kind replacement. And condition number 1 states that they should preserve and restore the horizontal panel, and any replacement shall be documented and replaced in kind. And the side porch also was rebuilt in 1978, and they're proposing to replace the porch platform and level the ceiling, and also handrail to meet current code standards. And the horizontal siding again, right here, original. And condition number 2 again stipulates that they should restore and preserve the original siding. The studio and the garden shed in the rear, they want to replace the foundation with concrete slab by lifting up the studio and pouring the concrete foundation and then lowering it. And also they want to replace the composite shingle with resawn cedar shingles. The redwood board batten wall, as well as the door and windows, are original. And condition number 3 and 5 again stipulates that it should be restored, and if they're going to replace in kind, it should be documented. And this staff recommendation is to adopt the resolution, issuing a determination consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards. And this concludes my presentation. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Surrey. Is there any questions of Surrey on the application? Okay. Hearing none, I will go ahead and open up the public hearing. Is the applicant or applicant's representative here?
I am, Mr. Chairman. I'm Brian Congleton. I'm representing Nancy Strom and Gavin Miller. I think the plans and the staff report fairly represent what we'd like to do. And I think at this point, I'll simply answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Is there any questions of Brian from the board?
Yes. I just had one question about the door on the shed. That's going to be repaired and maintained, or is it going to be totally replaced? Question.
I see no problem with repairing it. I'm not as convinced as the consultant is that door's original. It is a standard issue door that you can buy the same door today, but I think we're perfectly happy to have the bottom style repaired. Once we get the building on its new foundation, we can know what we need in terms of the dimension at the bottom of the door.
Okay.
And Brian,
sorry. And the stained glass will remain, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Jordan.
Brian, so with just back to the shed as well, you know, some of those walls, especially look like the back wall was almost had portions of it missing or had split or something like that. You don't have any issues with finding material that will match the existing material if you do need to do extensive repair. Is that your opinion?
No, that's correct. We met with the contractor earlier today and determined that we can find the redwood material. Hopefully we can find old redwood material that will match it in patina as well as the rough sawn finish. We're not going to put new material in. I don't think that would be appropriate. That's the problem with the front stairwell, partly, is that the work that was done in 1978 simply stands out as 1970s work rather than being of a quality that the original building had.
Okay, any other questions of Brian? Great, is anyone else in the public wishing to address the board on this application?
I'm Nancy Strong. I'm the owner along with my husband, Gavin Miller. And I just want to say that we really sincerely are interested in maintaining this as a historic residence, and, you know, certainly want to work with you guys and through Brian's leadership to make it as good as possible, because we're going to be here for the long haul. Oh, and I also have to say, Saray is doing a wonderful job.
Thank you, Nancy. Anyone else in the public wishing to address the board on this application? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the board.
I'm happy to make a motion if there's no further discussion.
I think this is a very nice project. It's done strategically, these interventions that make the house a lot more livable and hopefully can help preserve it into posterity. So I thank the architect and the owner for doing such a great job.
I agree. I think it's always nice to meet people who really care about their house and are very proud of what it has to offer in perpetuity. So thank you for that.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, Jordan. Do you want to make the motion?
Yeah, no, that's great. So I motion that with regards to Historic Resources Board Resolution number APN 010193010, we agree with the staff's findings and approve of the repair to include the siding repair of the rear studio, side porch, and front stairs and handrails as documented.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is that clear to staff? Okay, roll call, please.
Board Member Croman?
Yes.
Board Member Hall?
Yes.
Board Member Pomeroy?
Yes.
Chair Dyer?
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your support.
Go back to our agenda. Let me just see. I thought I saw Mr. Clausen, I see, is on the Zoom, and I'm sorry you may have missed what we said in the beginning. We unfortunately do not have a quorum for your application hearing today and needed to continue it for our following meeting in August. So I apologize for that. I believe.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I just thought I'd join the meeting today to observe and attend, and we'll look forward to the review in August. So thank you.
Great, thank you. So now go back to the agenda, and it's time for the director's report. Marnie.
Well, thank you. I just want to thank the board for all your work this afternoon. We're really excited to be moving this historic context statement forward, and we appreciate all the feedback that we got this afternoon. Again, if you have anything else that you want to contribute, please feel free to reach out to us in the next couple days. And we look forward to bringing back a final draft for your consideration at the next meeting. I don't really have any other items to report, so I will turn it back over to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Marnie. Any questions of Marnie or of anything from the board? Okay, we're now on to future agenda items, and we have, of course, a meeting coming up on August 15th, which would, I believe, probably a big portion of it will be for the final draft of the historic context statement update. Anything else from the board? Okay. With that, I will call for adjournment. Thanks everyone for their participation today. We'll see you next month.